Now, I know this may seem a little surprising, especially since in my last video I said I'm not going to be regularly uploading videos on like a consistent basis anymore. So this is a little soon after that, but I did mention I still want to talk about some films that are for sure coming out this year for sure, that I just want to have some thoughts aired out about. And this is one of them, Blumhouse's 2020 remake of the classic Universal monster film, The Invisible Man. Now, The Seventh Seal is my favorite movie of all time, but The Invisible Man is my favorite horror movie, as well as my favorite of the classic Universal monster films. So, of course, I was excited for a remake, but also cautious because the last time we got a remake of The Invisible Man was The Hollow Man, starring Kevin Bacon. And plus, Blumhouse, their last two films, at least the last two films I saw from them recently, weren't up to par. The Black Christmas remake was god awful piece of shit, and the Fantasy Island horror movie was underwhelming. Some potential in a few areas, but still underwhelming. But of course, the director and writer for this remake also directed and wrote Upgrade, a surprisingly awesome film from 2018. Yeah. So there was some good hope here. Now, this isn't going to be like a structured round per round kind of movie face off, but still some comparisons we can do here. Let's first deal with the setting of the film. The setting of the original 1933 film was, of course, in Britain during what is then modern era, kind of. Well, I guess I shouldn't really say it's modern era for them, even probably a little bit in the past, but you get the idea. Both these movies take place in their own relative respective modern settings. So it is a very different way, but they still approach it with the same kind of elements, with science being a big part of it. The scientist himself, Adrian Griffin, playing a huge part in the movie. And really delves into the psychology of these characters. So that's something they both share in common, although of course they're approaching in very different ways. You see in the 33 film, which is also based on the H.G. Wells novel the same name, it's focused on Adrian Griffin, the actual Invisible Man, and we follow him around, with some supporting characters we check back in with throughout the story. With this remake, the focus is really following Elisabeth Moss's character, Celia? Yeah, Celia. And she's pretty much the victim, like the object of Adrian Griffin's obsession. So we see it from her point of perspective, which immediately does make the whole premise of the film scarier. I mean, there was definitely some scary stuff in the original Invisible Man, but it's still the 30s, and since we're following around the actual monster of that film, some of the whole mystery and like suspense stuff is kind of taken out of the equation in the original film. I will admit that. This one, though, since we're following around with basically the victim of the movie, more or less, it does have more of a mystery, intrigue, suspense. Now, one thing that I've always found interesting is how movie versions of The Invisible Man tackle Adrian Griffin himself. You see, in the original H.G. Wells novel, he was always a bit of a sociopath even before he became invisible. In the novel, he stole from his dead dad, who had committed suicide, in order to fund his research. So, in the novel, he more or less stays kind of the same in terms of psychological stability. In the original 1933 film, he starts off as really a well-adjusted guy, but due to his experimentation that caused him to become unstable and wreak havoc, showing the dangers and of like scientific experimentation, and shows the downfalls of pushing too far without fully understanding what we are meddling with. Sorry, my speech pattern there was a little bit offbeat, a little Shatner-like, but the point I'm trying to say is like it really delves into like the tragedy of Adrian Griffin in the movie from 1933 as opposed to him just being a straight up sociopath in the original novel. Having said that, that makes the remake a little bit more closer accurate to the book because it's well established in this Blumhouse remake that Adrian Griffin was always a bit of a psychopath, even really dominating his younger brother at a very early age and tormenting him more, just as much or more than his girlfriend, Celia. And it shows that he is willing to go as far as he feels necessary to actually show that she is his and that he is in control, including finding a way to become invisible, fake his own death, and then just creep the living shit out of her, making her go insane, turning friends and family against her, making her feel isolated. It is a little more accurate to the book, and while it doesn't really make him like a completely three-dimensional character in a sense, it's still a very realistic version of someone who has that kind of mind frame, and it makes him still an engaging character to follow and listen to. Now let's take a look at how he becomes invisible, because there is a difference. In the, of course, book / original movie, it's due to, let's just say, science potion. I know there's probably an actual term for it, but this is movie science we're talking about, so let's just call it science potion. And in the original movie, there is an ingredient of this science potion that caused him to become mentally unstable. Now, in the movie from Blumhouse, it's a little bit different. You see, he has this suit that with a whole bunch of cameras on it that can give him the illusion of being invisible. Which is a very interesting take on it, because in this story, he's like a leader in the field of optics. And it is a very interesting thing to kind of create, and it does look kind of cool, actually. So, in these two movies, the highlight in terms of characters in the original film was, of course, Adrian Griffin himself. And the character highlight of the 2020 Blumhouse film is, of course, Elisabeth Moss's character, the main protagonist and victim / obsession of the villain in the film. Just to give you an idea of like the differences between this film. So, with all that getting out of the way, which one is technically better than the other? Well, they share a lot of similarities in terms of atmosphere, themes, pacing, character work, and portrayal. But also different enough where they're both each their own very distinct separate entities. So for some, they'll probably lean towards one they always prefer. But for me, as much as I really do love this Blumhouse remake, without the 1933 film, we would not have this. So yeah, I'm sticking with the original. That might be a little bit predictable, I guess, but that's just what I have to go with. But like I said, this Blumhouse remake, even though I had some concerns going in, was really freaking great, guys. Definitely go watch this movie. That's all I really have to say right now. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Force of habit.